The Soccer War, the most absurd war in history. In 1969, an unexpected and explosive conflict erupted between El Salvador and Honduras. What began as a series of heated soccer matches quickly escalated into a full-blown war. This is the story of the Soccer War, a brief but intense conflict that lasted only 100 hours but left a lasting impact. To understand the Soccer War, we need to delve into the underlying tensions between El Salvador and Honduras. El Salvador, a densely populated country with a growing population, faced severe economic pressures. Many Salvadorans migrated to neighboring Honduras in search of land and opportunities. Meanwhile, Honduras, a larger but less densely populated country, was grappling with its own economic challenges. The influx of Salvadoran migrants created competition for land and resources, fueling social and economic inequalities. During the late 1960s, tensions between El Salvador and Honduras began to escalate. Citizens from El Salvador started to migrate to Honduras and were often marginalized and faced discrimination. Land reforms in Honduras, aimed at redistributing land to peasants, further exacerbated the situation, as many migrants were among those displaced. In early 1969, the relationship between the two countries became increasingly strained. Nationalistic sentiments were running high, and both governments began to engage in hostile rhetoric. The stage was set for a confrontation, and it was a series of soccer matches that would provide the spark. In June 1969, the simmering tensions boiled over during a series of World Cup qualifying matches between El Salvador and Honduras. The first match was held in Tegucigalpa, Honduras, on June 8, 1969. Honduras won 1-0, but the victory was marred by violence. Fans from both sides clashed, resulting in injuries and heightened tensions. A Honduran fan recalled, "The atmosphere was charged. After the match, it felt like the whole city was ready to explode. We were proud of our win, but there was so much anger and hostility in the air." The second match took place in San Salvador on June 15, 1969. El Salvador won by 3 goals, but the victory was overshadowed by violent clashes between supporters. The riots escalated, resulting in several deaths and numerous injuries. Maria Sanchez, a Salvadoran supporter, recounted, "It was supposed to be a celebration, but it turned into chaos. People were fighting everywhere. It felt like the country was at war already." The third and decisive match was held in Mexico City on June 27, 1969, to ensure neutrality. El Salvador won by 1 goal in extra time, securing their place in the World Cup. However, the violence and unrest that accompanied these matches set the stage for a much larger conflict. Ricardo Lopez, a player for the Salvadoran team, said, "We played our hearts out, but there was a sense of dread. We knew this wasn't just about soccer anymore." On July 14, 1969, less than 3 weeks after the final match, El Salvador launched a surprise military offensive against Honduras. The Air Force bombed targets in Honduras, including airports, military installations, and key locations. Ground forces crossed the border, quickly advancing into Honduran territory. The war had begun. The Salvadoran military, despite being smaller in number, was better equipped and more organized. Their initial assault involved coordinated air and ground attacks, using aircraft such as the F-4U Corsair and Douglas C-47s to target key locations and disrupt Honduran defenses. A retired Salvadoran officer explained, "Our strategy was to strike hard and fast, to overwhelm the Honduran forces before they could organize a strong defense." In July 15th and 16th, Salvadoran troops made significant initial gains, capturing several key towns and strategic locations. However, the Honduran military, with support from local militias, mounted a determined defense. Honduran forces utilized guerrilla tactics and fortified positions to slow the Salvadoran advance. Pedro Martinez, a Honduran militia member, described, "We were outgunned and outnumbered, but we knew the land. We used every advantage we had, from the terrain to hit-and-run tactics to push back." By July 17th, the war reached a stalemate. Both sides suffered significant casualties. and the fighting became increasingly brutal. The Salvadoran advance stalled, and the conflict became a war of attrition. The international community was quick to respond to the escalating conflict. The Organization of American States, OAS, called for an immediate ceasefire and initiated diplomatic efforts to bring the two countries to the negotiating table. On July 18, 1969, after 100 hours of intense fighting, a ceasefire was declared. The OAS brokered a peace agreement, and Salvadoran troops began to withdraw from Honduran territory. The war was officially over, but the aftermath of the conflict left deep scars on both nations. Ambassador Raul Fernandez, an OAS diplomat, remarked, "The negotiations were tense. Both sides were exhausted and bitter, but there was a recognition that the fighting had to stop." The soccer war resulted in significant casualties and destruction. Approximately 2,000 people were killed and thousands more were injured. The conflict displaced thousands, exacerbating the humanitarian crisis in the region. The war also strained the already fragile economies of both countries, leading to long-term economic and social challenges. The war disrupted trade and agriculture, leading to food shortages and economic instability. Both countries faced a difficult recovery, with infrastructure repair and economic rebuilding taking years. The war left deep psychological scars on the populations of both countries. Families were torn apart, and the animosity between Salvadorans and Hondurans lingered for decades. Rosa Gutierrez, a displaced Salvadoran, shared, "We lost everything, our home, our land, and our sense of safety. It took years to rebuild our lives, and the memories of those days still haunt us." The soccer war is shrouded in mystery and unresolved tensions. What drove two nations to war over a series of soccer matches? How did the underlying political and economic issues escalate so quickly? This wild conflict serves as a stark reminder of how seemingly minor events can trigger significant and violent outcomes when deeper issues are not addressed. The war also left a legacy of mistrust and resentment that lingered for decades. Historians and political analysts continue to study the soccer war, examining the complex interplay of nationalism, economic pressures, and political instability that led to the conflict. The role of media and propaganda in fueling the war is also a critical area of study. Dr. Laura Chavez, a historian, noted, "The soccer war was a perfect storm of tensions. The soccer matches were just the catalyst. The real causes were deep-rooted and complex, involving years of economic hardship and political maneuvering. The soccer war was a brief but intense conflict that highlighted the deep-seated issues between El Salvador and Honduras. As we reflect on the soccer war, it serves as a reminder of the complex interplay between sports, politics, and society, and the need for dialogue and cooperation to prevent such conflicts in the future." So what do you think? Is this the most stupid war in history? Let us know. Comment below. And don't forget to like and subscribe. Thanks for watching.